Hey guys, welcome back to Rebel Media. Merry Christmas. It is that time of year at the time we're recording this video. Today we're going to be talking about Stonewall Jackson. The majority of this information I read in this book back here, Rebel Yell. You should check it out. It's a good book. Also, we're lucky enough to use some photographs that are taken by someone I really respect and admire. You can check out his work at Older Soldier on Instagram, and he has a Flickr account, and I'll make sure I post both of the links to his work below. So we kind of have those integrated with the story here, and let's get started. Hope you enjoy.
My religious belief teaches me to feel as safe in battle as I do in bed. God has fixed the time for my death, and I do not concern myself about that, but to always be ready, no matter when it may overtake me. That is the way all men should live, then all would be equally brave.
Thomas Jonathan Jackson was born on January 21st, 1824, in the little town of Clarksburg, Virginia, now West Virginia, on January 21st, 1824. Jackson became an orphan at the age of 2 when his father died. Apparently his dad was a failure and lost all his money on cards and failed investments. His mom was beautiful and of high character. She died when Jackson was 7, and Jackson loved his mom and never forgot her. He was then sent to live with his uncle. He loved to read and learned early. He was an avid outdoorsman. He loved hunting, fishing, and as a young man, he was quiet and honest. All his life he was driven by self-improvement. He used to say, "You can be whatever you resolve to be." Not the smartest young man, but he would never give up, and he was always determined to learn and succeed. He was also extremely religious, and he had read the Bible cover to cover at a very young age. At only 17, he was a constable, and he would track down deadbeat debtors. Shortly thereafter, he fought like hell to be admitted into West Point, and thanks to Congressman Hayes, Jackson got his shot, although he barely passed the entrance exam. He was an awkward cadet. He spoke to few and spent most of his time studying rather than fraternizing. He graduated 17th in his class of 1846. He went right off to the Mexican-American War. He couldn't wait to be in battle. He was an artillery officer, and he damaged his hearing at this time. Everyone noticed how completely calm he was. He also learned a decent amount of Spanish and considered it the true language of love. Jackson became a professor at VMI, Virginia Military Institute. He would memorize his lectures the night before, and if his students interrupted him, he would start the entire lecture over. Some of the cadets called him Old Tom Fool Jackson. They also knew he was a war hero. He was meant to be a soldier, not a teacher. During this time, he also begins skirting the law and starts a Sunday school for African Americans. This he loved far more than teaching at VMI because of his love of God and that it was truly the number one thing in his heart. 2 of his students actually asked Jackson to purchase them, and Jackson did. One of the men was named Albert, who was a handyman, and he eventually bought his own freedom, and Amy, who was a housekeeper. Through marriage, Jackson gained another slave named Hattie and her 2 sons, whom Jackson taught to read, which was against the law. I've also read that he took in a girl who had been orphaned named Emma. After the war, Jackson's wife said that Jackson said that he would prefer to see the Negroes go free. He said that in the Bible, slavery was sanctioned by God himself. Therefore, he accepted slavery as undesirable, but allowed by providence. The Jackson family would gather with their servants and all would read the Bible together. He was not an abolitionist, and he saw them as people trying to divide the nation and cause a war. He married a reverend's daughter named Eleanor Junkin. She died 15 months later after giving birth to a son who also died. In 1857, he remarried to a woman named Anna Morrison, whose dad was also a minister and the first president of Davison College. They had another child who died, but his wife survived this time, and Jackson loved her dearly. In 1862, they had a little girl who survived, and Jackson was finally a dad. Jackson loved children. He would always play games with them, and his quiet, reserved nature would disappear. After John Brown's famous raid on Harper's Ferry, Professor Stonewall and his VMI cadets were ordered to provide security for John Brown's execution in Charleston, Virginia. There were rumors about his supporters coming to rescue him. Also in the audience, John Wilkes Booth. Jackson said Brown behaved with unflinching firmness, and he hoped that Brown would be forgiven for his actions and allowed to enter heaven.
I believe the Providence will bless us with the fruits of peace. But if after all we have done that we can for the honorable preservation of the Union, there shall be a determination upon the free states to deprive us of our right, which is the fair interpretation of the Constitution as already decided by the Supreme Court, guarantees to us, I am in favor of secession.
It wasn't simply slavery, as what Jackson saw as Southern rights, but a constitutional system that's granted the states sovereign power that trumped that of the federal government. Jackson felt that the government did not have the right to invade the sovereign states who had already joined the Union voluntarily, and were now deciding to leave that Union upon their own free will. For a Union held together at gunpoint is not a real Union or constitutional. Jackson thought, and rightfully so, that the federal government was not God. The federal government was created by the people of the sovereign states. Once the war began, Jackson began in the duty of training the men of Virginia to be soldiers. Jackson rode a small horse named Little Sorrel. People say it looked a lot like he was riding a pony since Jackson was so tall. He led what became famously known as the Stonewall Brigade. His mentality was to keep the enemy confused and with no time to plan or strategize, keep them confused and guessing as to what their next move might be. To attack hard and fast, because he knew the South would not win a long war against the North's vast amount of resources. General Sherman is known for his total war campaigns, his march to the sea, and famously saying he wanted to make Georgia howl. Well, after the First Battle of Manassas, Jackson pretty much wanted him to do the same thing. Go right to Washington and Philadelphia and raise hell to end the war as quickly as possible. Jackson said,
We ought to invade their country now, and not give them time to make preparation to invade ours. Give me 10,000 men, and I'll be in Washington by morning.
President Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee opposed it. They felt the North was the aggressor and they wanted to take a high moral ground and a defensive approach. However, in my opinion, Jackson was probably right. He earned his nickname Stonewall in the First Battle of Manassas. A Confederate general came running up to him in a panic. "They are beating us back! They are beating us back!" To which Jackson replied, "Then we will give them the bayonet." Later, that same general told his men, "Look, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. Rally around the Virginians." Okay guys, just for total disclosure here, there's a bit of debate about Stonewall's nickname. Some people think that they were saying, "There he stands like a stone wall," as in he wasn't doing anything, which is funny, but I don't think it's true. Jackson told his men when they charge, "Yell like furies," the old rebel yell. Him and his men turned the tide of that first battle, taking the win for the Confederacy. In October 1861, Jackson was promoted to Major General. He conducted a winter campaign in January, and many of his sick and exhausted men thought he was a madman. He became known for his crazy marches. He once marched 40 miles in 2 days and had no compassion for stragglers. His campaigns and strategies are still considered today military genius. In 1862, he became a hero of the South and the Shenandoah Valley. He never had more than 16,000 men, but he continued to persevere against 64,000 federal troops. His most famous battle was Chancellorsville, a bold flanking attack using the forest for cover, sneaking up on the Federals, and it worked. They didn't see him coming and went running off into the forest. Jackson, wanting to press them through the night, scouting ahead of his men, ends up being mistaken for the enemy by rebel pickets and is shot and badly wounded. When Robert E. Lee finds out, he says, Ah, Captain, any victory is dearly bought which deprives us of the services of General Jackson, even if for a short time. Jackson's arm was amputated, and when Lee heard of this, he famously said, "He has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right." Jackson's wife came to see him, and the joy of her presence gave him a little bit of strength to rally, but it was not for long. The general was dying of pneumonia. A few moments before he died, Jackson cried out in delirium, "Order AP Hill to the front! Prepare for action!" Hey guys, real quick, another fun history fact. Both Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee called out for little pal AP Hill on their deathbeds. And I guess Robert E. Lee said, "Tell Hill he must come up. Strike the tent." After a week of suffering, he said quietly with a relieved expression,
Let us pass over the river and rest under the shade of the trees.
Jackson died at 3:15 p.m. on May 10, 1863. You can still visit the very place where he died and listen to the ticking of the very same clock that was there when he passed. Stonewall Jackson is a pretty interesting guy, to say the least. My great-great-great-grandfather, I don't know if I have the right amount of greats in there, but he fought as a common soldier in the Stonewall Brigade, and that's something I'm real proud of. I admire how Stonewall trusts the plan, trusts God, just goes with it. To be courageous and brave and always try to be better and never give up. These are admirable qualities in a man, and I think it's cool. I hope you guys dig the video. Leave a comment for me, let me know what you thought. And of course, a special shout out to Older Soldier 2020 for letting us use his beautiful photos. Make sure you check out his work too. Again, the links are below, and we'll see you guys on the next one.